Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Shake Sales. I'm your host, Maggie, the sales evangelist at Mailshake. And today we are talking with Gladius Sovereign. So Gladius, he's the creator of Sovereign Mind Method. And our topic of discussion today is helping sales rep overcome limiting beliefs. So Gladius, I'm super excited to talk about this subject with you today. Thanks so much for being here. Do you mind taking some time to introduce yourself?
Totally. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Maggie. Really excited to share with the audience and a little bit about me. I was in sales for a good 3 or 4 years. Started off as a SDR. I had this really pivotal experience where this CIO of this Fortune 500 company just like slammed the phone in my face. Just like, we don't need that.
Oh.
Triggered me to start a sales mastermind group where I gathered a whole bunch of peers and we would like meet on these calls every week and help each other grow and solve problems in our career. And it was a really special time for me. And I can definitely relate to a lot of the struggles that came from my personal experience, like feeling not good enough, feeling not worthy, despite how much I was succeeding on the leaderboards, creating income for myself. So really excited to kind of jump into, the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you brought up a good point of just that one, standalone event, that kind of made you connect with other peers and create that group. Because even if you are at the top of your leaderboard in sales, and I've been there too, you can still have a lot of limiting beliefs because there are a lot of things outside of your control in sales, and there's a lot of things you can control, but that could lead to anxiety and having anxiety in sales. So that's where I really want to start with this conversation. So how do you relate anxiety in sales, and what are some things you can do to fix it?
Yeah, I like to share from my personal experience, which is that basically from the time that I was a little kid, I always had this ball of anxiety in my gut. And that persisted with me all the way through starting therapy when I was 18. Mm-hmm. And there was this like eureka moment after a session. I was driving home, and for like a few seconds that anxiety like went away, and I was like, what is this? This is possible? And so that gave me a window into, I'm like carrying around emotions in my body that are so latent, so underlying that I wasn't even consciously aware that they were there. And so I think that when it comes to sales, there's that present for a lot of us. But the other component that I think caused me the most anxiety was beliefs around what it means if I fail, what it means if I'm rejected, what it means if I'm not working harder and harder and harder all the time. The meaning-making muscle in a lot of us is always, always, always going off. And so there can be an underlying sense of, if I'm rejected, it means I'm not good enough. If I'm rejected, it means they don't like me. Or there can be an underlying sense of, if I fail, it means I'm a loser. Or if I fail, it means I'm a failure, tying it back to my identity. So trying to speak from the firsthand of things that, I've navigated myself, those stories, those beliefs, I feel are what cause a lot of the underlying anxiety and stress. It's stories that we create that then we project onto our experience that cause the underlying anxiety.
Got it. Yeah. And I think, anyone really can borrow these lessons of making sure that they're not creating these stories in their head or changing the narrative of the story. But I think as a salesperson, it's really important to do that. It might sound cliche, but you are going to, it's like a muscle you kind of need to create, because you're going to be dealing with rejection at a higher rate than, other people out there in accounting roles, or I don't know, any other operations or anything like that that's not, in that capacity. So I think the quicker you can do it or realize that in sales and build that muscle or build, those things around it, I think not the easier it's going to get, but at least you're going to be able to handle it at a different rate.
Yeah. And on the flip side, what's also true is that in sales, we can learn how to create constructive beliefs and constructive narratives. things like sales is helping good people solve problems. Or if I'm rejected, it means I'm one step closer to yes. Stuff that encourages us and motivates us to continue moving despite the exact same phenomenon happening. CIO hangs up in my face. Instead of feeling fear, sadness, feeling like, yeah, I'm going to get after it. Like, let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you mentioned like you had that experience when you were driving home after a therapy session. Was that before or after you were already in sales?
Define before or after, because I was already selling candy and laser pens in high school. So,
yeah. Yeah, I guess like, were those some of those, did you know those tactics already going into like when you had that conversation with the CIO?
I wish. I really wish. It wasn't until years later I reached this pinnacle in my sales career. I was the first account executive hired at Toggle, which is a time tracking software company. I built them up to their first $1 million in ARR. I hired and trained a team, et cetera, et cetera. And I quit that job so that I could do my own sales consulting. And at that point, I booked 3 5-figure clients within like the first 3 months of my business operating. And I felt miserable. I felt like actually like not happy at all. And it occurred to me that like, wow, there's literally no amount of money that I can make, even if I'm successful by outside standards, that's going to make me feel internally good enough and worthy. Yeah. And that realization did 2 things for me. It broke my heart, and it made me decide to do something about it, to find out a way to let go of these beliefs that were preventing me from feeling like a worthy and good enough person.
Got it. Yeah. And it's awesome that you can connect it that way. But not awesome that that situation happened, or I guess in the grand scheme of things, it is good that it happened because it made you want to change the way that you were feeling. But at least having that moment and realizing like, hey, even if I do super well, even if I've been so successful at this, job that I've had in the past, and I can create something else on my own, doesn't mean that I'm going to feel good at the end of the day if I don't solve all these underlying, ideas or beliefs that are coming up above here. So that's awesome that you're able to do that and just realize it and connect the two and realize that you needed to make a change from it, because I think a lot of people in sales maybe just choose to ignore it. But yeah, it kind of leads me, we talked about this a little bit, like some blockers in here, but what do you think are the biggest blockers that prevent people from having success in sales?
Yes. So the 2 that I already mentioned, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, those are huge. There's this interesting, I'll share the simplest way in the entire planet to discover what your limiting beliefs actually are. Here's how it works. When you say words out loud that are pure nonsense, it doesn't trigger any emotions or any sensations in your body, and it doesn't trigger a logical, like, oh, that's true. So what I invite people to do is say the words of a belief out loud and notice, does this make emotional sense or does this make any logical sense, right? So I already suggested 2 beliefs that you can try this with, saying the words out loud. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. For other people, it's really, really specific language. It's I'm not good enough. So it's good enough instead of enough, right? And then for other people, there's an underlying sense of I can't trust myself, or I can't do this. These generalized senses that come up as thoughts in our head that then get fused together with like deflated emotional energy. A lot of folks have beliefs around failure and rejection. So that these are entire belief systems that you can explore that are completely distinct. It's not, I'm not good enough. It's, if I fail, it means I'll lose everything. That's planted from a story that Dad told me when I was 6 years old that I never thought about for years and years, but there it is running in the background. So those are a few places to look, and one simple exercise that you can do beyond just speaking the words out loud is to use something called sentence completions. So the psychologist Nathaniel Brandon created this tool for his for a psychology practice where you write the first half of a sentence out. And then you allow your subconscious mind to take the wheel and write as many answers to that to finish the sentence or complete it as possible. No self-censoring, no thinking about it, just let it flow out. So what I recommend for salespeople is to try this one. If I'm rejected, comma, it means ... And your brain will fill in the gaps with your limiting beliefs about what failure means, about what rejection means. So you can try that same thing with failure and rejection and get some good stuff out of it.
And what do you ultimately do when you have a list like that? Like, what do you take away from that?
The biggest first step is self-awareness. It's really it. Once you say it and you're like, oh crap, that resonates. It's like, now I know what the name of the game is that I get to play. Here's my belief. What am I going to do about it? Right? So awareness is what grants you agency to make a decision to stop believing it. And then there's all kinds of, approaches out there. You can use the Byron Katie method, the Lefkoe method, or my approach, the Sovereign Mind method, which I'm more than happy to geek out on and share how it works with anyone.
Yeah. Can you give us a little bit of information about your method, the Sovereign Mind?
I would love to. All right. Yeah.
You're like, don't ask me twice.
Yeah. So I'm super open about this because I just really care that people learn. You can go from I'm not worthy to I am worthy in under an hour, and it's a permanent, lasting change. Like, here's how it works. So our beliefs are experiential constructs. We create beliefs through our experience, and we have multiple senses that contribute to our experience. Beliefs don't just make logical sense, right? Otherwise, you would just say, oh, I know I'm good enough. Done. I'm in. Right?
That would be cool.
Here's the big open secret. Our beliefs also make visual sense to us because seeing is believing, and you need to see it to believe it. So there's a visual component to our beliefs, and beliefs also make emotional sense. That's why we say things like, that feels true. That makes sense. When you approach clearing your beliefs at a logical, visual, and emotional level, you strip that belief away from all of your senses, and it stops making sense. It's really that easy. And I can go into, practically speaking, the simple way to do that is to decide for yourself that it's no longer true for you logically, right? And anyone can do that. And if you need support in doing that, there's all kinds of advice online about reframing, and that's approaching beliefs logically. When you Google it, that's pretty much what you'll get is a whole bunch of logical techniques. So that's one place to begin. There's this really cool thing called the Lefkoe method, which offers a way to process beliefs visually. And here's the core essence of it. Maggie, do you see this can?
Yes, LaCroix.
Lemon LaCroix?
Lemon,
yeah. It's yellow, it's shiny, and it's real as far as you can tell, right? Here's the same question. Do you see anywhere around you, I'm not good enough?
Yes.
Where do you see it? I'm curious.
I guess no, you're right. No.
Right.
I see what you mean. Exactly. Sorry.
No, it's perfectly okay. Because in truth, in reality, if you look around you, beliefs don't exist in three-dimensional space. It's a construct that we create. In some sense, it lives in our mind. The real trick is looking back through the memories that led you to learn that in the first place and realize that you never actually saw it in three-dimensional space. And when I guide people through that experience, they say things like, yeah, I saw it. It was in my father's eyes. And I go, aha, did you see an eyeball? Or did you see I'm not good enough? And then that's when their brain literally goes, oh, I didn't see I'm not good enough. I saw my father look at me with disappointment. Oh. And it's in that moment that the belief gets another layer of release from that person's consciousness. The same principle applies to feelings, emotions, and sensations. So I know I'm going at 10 miles a minute. You can slow me down or interrupt me at any time. But the same principle applies where we say, okay, I know I never saw that I'm not good enough, but I felt not good enough. Mm-hmm. To which I say, I completely honor your experience. Let me ask you this. How do you know that you felt not good enough? What are the emotions? What are the sensations in your body that tell you that? And they go, I feel, some tightness in my chest, mm-hmm. maybe some sadness behind my eyes. It's different for every person. And that's what's remarkable, is that there's no one universal sensation called not good enough. It's different for everybody. So in truth, what we feel are emotions and sensations in our body, and then we fuse those sensations with a story. These feelings mean that I'm not good enough. That's how I know, because feeling is one of our primary ways of knowing.
Yeah.
So when you break the agreement and you say these feelings no longer mean that I'm not good enough, that emotional energy releases from the body. It no longer means that for you. And even if those feelings come up again, you happen to feel tension in your chest, thank God, it doesn't mean that I'm not good enough anymore. And that belief completely loses all of its emotional power over your life. And that's how it works.
That's awesome. No, and I didn't want to interrupt you because you were going at the perfect pace and explaining it that way, and just thinking in my head of how you can relate those things back to sales as well, and how a lot of those beliefs will come up. And yeah, even just I think we've all been there in sales where the emotions do take over our body, just like you were saying, like tightness in your chest when you're hearing certain things on the phone, or when you're asking certain questions, or you're in a meeting with your manager at the end of the month, and disconnecting that story with it. I know I didn't say it as well as you did, but it's kind of, how I'm articulating it at the end of it, though.
You're exactly right. Because these feelings don't just come up in one spot in our life. They also come up at the dinner table with our loved ones. They also come up in our romantic relationships. For me, a huge component of being so passionate about this work is that I can actually feel love more freely and deeply after letting go of stories like I don't deserve love. I'm unlovable. And so it's had such a big impact in my life beyond even work or sales, etc. So it really can impact every aspect of our experience.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think that's the amazing thing sometimes of some of these things that we do in sales, like what we're talking about today, blocking, or not blocking, but getting rid of limiting beliefs, or communication, and all these things that you can work on in a sales career, not to relay everything back to sales, but can help in our personal lives. I've talked with other salespeople that say, because of these tactics I've learned in sales and the way I communicate in sales, my communication at home has gotten way better. My listening skills at home have gotten way better. And I know it has for me too. So I just love that there's one more deeper layer that could not only help us in sales, but also in our personal lives as well.
Oh, totally.
But, you may have already went through some items, but I did want to finish with, a last question here of, what are some actionable items to unlock salespeople's full potential and stop some of those limiting beliefs?
I would say very first step on this front is becoming self-aware of what your limiting beliefs actually are. And I've got an ebook on my website. You go to sovereignmind.org/method. You can get a copy of my free ebook, How to Discover Your Limiting Belief Systems. And there's a funny thing where it's like the belief system is BS. So it's like how to find your BS anyway. So that's one component, is just becoming aware moment to moment. And on that front, something that I really, really love to share with people, and this is outside of my private practice, is your body contains a lot of wisdom. When these sensations are coming up in the moment, you can attune your awareness to that tension in the chest, and you can ask it a simple question. What are you trying to tell me? What message do you have for me? And you can engage in a dialogue with that sensation. Your body is trying to communicate to you. The language that it has is this tightness, is this sadness, is this tension, right? When you engage in that dialogue and you get curious towards the sensations, instead of numbing them out, distracting from them, running away from them, you learn a lot about yourself really quickly. And that's another way to build that self-awareness. So next time you feel that, just get curious towards yourself, start a dialogue.
I love that. And I am such a like body person, if that's a good way to describe it. Yeah. But like when I feel emotions, my body is totally reacting to it. Like I get red in the face during certain times. My chest will get tight. And I always think it's like, I did some type of personality test a while ago, that's like something part of my personality. I'm not like a head person. It's like full on body. So it's cool that, creating that communication between the two of them, because I've definitely been there before. But awesome. And thank you for, giving that information about your ebook out there. Gladius, thanks so much for this conversation. What are some other ways that people can learn more about you or just get in touch with you?
Sure. Go to my website, sign up for my newsletter. That's at sovereignmind.org. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/GLADS, GLADS.
That's awesome. Sweet. Well, super excited to learn more. Thank you so much for this great conversation, Gladius. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Shake Sales. We'll catch you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye.